Welcome to Old School Sports and our OOTP 20 through playthrough of the Kansas City Royals. We have been looking for a challenge for our first game in OOTP 23, and we have been thinking seriously about the Royals for the last couple of months, and we've made the decision to try to return Kansas City to its previous glory. This is a franchise that from the mid to late 70s through the mid 80s was consistently one of the best teams in baseball, culminating in their first World Series championship in 1985. And then, of course, 30 years later in 2015, won a second World Championship. But there's really been a lot of famine for this rabid baseball fan base since that 1985 World Series championship. Although they did get the title in 2015, they only have two playoff appearances since 1985, which is the lowest in all of baseball, behind even the expansion teams from the 90s. So the Royals have been in a difficult situation given the economics of baseball today, and our goal is going to be to try to turn the situation around. In this episode, we're just going to do a quick look at what the roster looks like and then share what our game settings for this game are. You can see we are playing it in challenge mode, although it doesn't appear that you can actually log into OOTP 23 yet with Perfect Team not being up and running. So I don't know whether it'll eventually let me log into it, but regardless, I guess we're in challenge mode, whether or not I'm able to actually log in and track my performance there. Looking at the Royals' financial situation, it's not great in the kind of bottom quarter of the game in both budget and player payroll. Very limited money for free agents right now, although we do have some capacity for extensions next year, which will be helpful. But a below average market size, poor fan loyalty, and very mediocre fan interest as the 2022 season begins. Scouting budget and development budget are both relatively low. I would like to get those higher. Obviously, with only $2.5 million for free agents, don't have a ton of capacity to do it right now, but do have some thoughts on how I might try to open up a little bit of money before the season begins to potentially put some money into scouting and development, and also to potentially change some of our personnel. The ownership situation is not great with John Sherman demanding in terms of his patience, controlling in terms of his fiscal personality. So, a little more challenging owner to deal with than in several other situations around the league. He's looking for close to 500 ball this year, which I think is going to be a pretty significant challenge. Wants us to upgrade a position in right field. Probably not going to be too hard to do given the lack of talent on this team, although whether I'm going to go and pick up a right fielder as my main acquisition is questionable. And then wants us to get into the position to be in the playoffs in the next 5 years by 2026, which with the expanded playoff format now, I think is certainly a reasonable objective to hope that we can sneak into the playoffs at least once in the next 5 years, which for a team that has, as I mentioned, only been in the playoffs twice in the last 36 seasons would actually be a decent achievement if we're able to pull that off. From a player development perspective, although our major league roster is kind of weak, we're actually in a pretty good spot as far as our minor league system, ranked third overall, according to OOTP. Bobby Witt Jr., one of the top prospects in the game, even though he's off to a bit of a slow start, hitting under 150 in his first couple of weeks in the major leagues. Have no doubt that he is going to become a big-time offensive player for us. You can see that, at least according to our scout, should be plus contact, plus gap power, plus home run power, with hopefully slightly above average eye and discipline if he's able to develop as well as we hope he will and certainly looks like he can potentially play a very good defensive third base, hopefully borderline gold glove caliber, and could certainly also play acceptable shortstop or second base to us at some point down the line if that's the direction things evolve for us. Looking at the actual Major League roster, though, we have a few holes to fill, unfortunately. Catcher is actually probably the biggest strength of this team. Salvador Perez is obviously a very good defensive catcher and one of the premier offensive catchers in the game, coming off a brilliant season with 48 homers and 121 runs batted in. His contract is massive for the Royals, going to be $18 million this year and then $20 million plus each of the 3 seasons after that. So he will likely be, 20 to 25% of our team's budget in the coming years. We'll have to decide as he gets a little older whether or not that's something that we can live with, but he's certainly the best player on the team right now. And then in Cam Gallagher, we've got a pretty darn good backup who also has above average catcher ability and is, kind of close to a league average type hitter, although he certainly doesn't have ideal power at the age of 29 years old. But catcher is still an obvious strength for the Royals, and then we also have Melendez in the minors if we decide to move on from Gallagher or Perez in the coming seasons. Got a glut of infielders, Hunter Dozier, who can fortunately play more than just first base for us. Going to be an interesting call on him over the long term, kind of a league average type of hitter. Does have good defensive versatility, although he's not an exceptional defensive player. The issue with him is that after this season, his contract is going to be $7.25 million, $9 million, and then a team option for $10 million. Seems like he is perhaps a bit of a luxury for a team like the Royals to have. Vinny Pasquantino, a youngster, looks like he actually could have a pretty good bat for us. Doesn't really have a position defensively. He's a first baseman. Looking at his ratings, could put him out in left field if we really needed to, but looks like he is going to be a prototypical designated hitter for this team most likely, but is a relatively inexpensive left-handed bat, so we will probably find a role for him. I mentioned earlier in the episode that we did have some ideas about trying to free up some salary to put into player scouting and player development, and when I mentioned that, Carlos Santana was exactly who I was thinking of. A soon-to-be 36-year-old making $10.5 million a year, coming off of a season in which he batted .214, 2 straight years with an OPS plus of under 100 is a luxury that the Royals, I do not believe, can afford. So I'm not going to go making wholesale changes to the team this first year. Basically, my goal is just to build a coaching staff that I really like and work on developing some of the young players and hopefully don't lose too many games. But Santana seems like someone that we need to kind of move on from that contract. He's in the final year, going to be gone after this season regardless. Even if we have to keep some of that contract and even if we have to throw in a couple of mediocre prospects to get rid of it, I would rather put that money into player development and scouting and perhaps some higher quality coaches than in a 36-year-old first baseman who's not with us for the long term. Whit Merrifield, pretty important player for the Royals, excellent contact hitter, good at avoiding strikeouts. Got some speed, got some positional versatility, and can play a average, infielder, average outfielder. Definitely having a player like him for less than $3 million is someone we're happy to have on the roster. The issue with him is that we're going to have a player option for $6.5 million next year. That may be getting a little expensive for a player who will be 34 years old next season. So we'll have a big decision to make on him in the offseason, but certainly feel like he can be a contributing member of the team this year. And then Adalberto Mondesi, our starting second baseman or shortstop, depending on what we decide to do. Kind of a below average bat, unfortunately. Very good speed and a very good defensive infielder, so he has some value there, but he will also be a free agent. Oh, not free agent, but he'll be arbitration eligible after this season, and his salary, at least now, is expected to about double next year if we want to keep him. So another player who is we're going to have to make some decisions on in the not so distant future. We already mentioned Bobby Witt Jr., who is hopefully going to be the cornerstone of this team for the next decade or however long we're playing through this simulation. Last infielder to mention is Nicky Lopez, similar to Mondesi, a very good defensive shortstop slash second baseman. Not much power, but he's under our control for a few more seasons. Similar to Mondesi, though, his contract is going to get significantly better or significantly higher next year. I would think it would be surprising that we would be able to keep both Mondesi and Lopez. We'll see what we decide as we get further into the sim and get to know the players a little better and see how they perform this season. Moving to the outfielders in left field, Andrew Benintendi, good solid plus major league bat, a respectable defensive left fielder, had a solid season for the Royals last year, 109 OPS plus, 107 WRC plus. Issue with him again is $9 million is a lot for the Royals to be paying him. Probably going to be the second best offensive player on our team behind Perez this season, unless Bobby Witt Jr. really explodes on the scene. But probably not someone that we're going to be building around for the long term, because odds are he's going to be looking for a pretty big payday next offseason. Michael Taylor in center field, a brilliant defensive center fielder. Very happy to have him there. Minus bat, which is not optimal. His contract at $4.5 million for a great defensive center fielder is not bad, and we do have him under contract for next season. But as his age, going to be 31 soon without much of a bat, I don't know that he's someone that we're going to be re-upping 2 seasons from now. Kyle Isbell, young right fielder, looks like he can certainly be decent defensively and a league average type of bat. The issue with him is with only 43 days of major league service, we are going to have him under team control for the next 5+ seasons, and hopefully at pretty reasonable prices. So he is a player who could be part of our future here, even though as you know, ownership has asked us to look in terms of upgrading our right field position. And then Edward Olivares, another right fielder, another young player, low contract for the next few years, similar defensive profile to Isbell, but probably not quite as good of a hitter. So, other than Bobby Witt Jr., it's hard to pick out too many players, maybe Isbell, maybe Pasquantino, who are going to be with us, 3 to 4 years from now. But we'll know more about that as we get into the season and get to know the team better and see how these guys actually perform. Moving on to the Royals pitching staff, it's not a great situation. The only thing that is positive is that there's a fair amount of youth. Have a lot of pitchers on the staff in their mid-20s, and the hope is that several of them grow into good, solid, cost-effective major leaguers for us over the next few seasons. Zach Greinke is obviously the cornerstone of the staff. Came back to the Royals on a $13 million contract for this upcoming season. Honestly, when you look at where OOTP has him, or I guess more accurately where our scout has him, probably not as good as I thought he might be. If you look at Greinke's career, it's very Mike Messina-esque. Lots of Gold Gloves. Not as many All-Star appearances as Messina, but Greinke does have his Cy Young Award, which Messina did not. Messina obviously won 20 games in his final season after having a career high of 19. Greinke in a similar situation. Hard to imagine that he's going to win 20 at the age of 38 here with the Royals. He is a player that I don't think I want to trade right now, but we could certainly look to move on from midway through the season. I'm just not really sure how much we would get for him right now. It would be nice to open up that money to put even more into our scouting and player development and our coaching staff, but I don't know what kind of market there's going to be for him. I think he probably got the best option he could at this stage in his career coming back to Kansas City. Among the younger starters, Chris Bubich definitely looks like he can be a solid major league starter. The big question is whether we can get him to be anything better than a average to slightly above average major league starter, given that particularly once Greinke's gone, whether that's in July or at the end of this season, he's going to kind of be fronting our rotation, along with Brad Keller most likely, who again profiles kind of as an average major league starter. And he's also at the point in his career where he is making some more money. So arbitration next year could be $5 million for Keller, so he may begin to price himself out of Kansas City. Carlos Hernandez, another starter, looks like he's clearly kind of a below average profile, at least in terms of his stuff movement and control, although he does have 5 pitches, including a mediocre changeup. And then Brady Singer, at least here on March 16th, looks like he is also going to be in the rotation. Again, kind of a average major league starting profile, but a reasonable price with only 2 years of major league experience at this point. Kind of a similar story in the bullpen, quite honestly, with a lot of interchangeable parts, I guess would be the most polite way to put it. Guys who are decent major league pitchers, but no one exceptional that I think we're going to be building around for the long term. When you look at Taylor Clark and Jake Brentz, Dylan Coleman, Amir Garrett, looks like his profile might not be quite as good as some of those other guys, although he does have 2 excellent pitches with his fastball and slider. Jackson Kowar, maybe some potential with 3 good pitches to turn into someone who can at least be a spot starter for us if need be. Daniel Lynch and Drew Parrish, 2 lefties for us, but pretty average profiles. The lack of movement from Drew Parrish is a fly ball pitcher with unexceptional velocity is probably not going to be an optimal situation. Colin Snyder, again, a kind of typical average major league arm. Looks like Gabe Spire, similar situation, a little bit better movement and control than several of the people on the team, and he's a ground ball pitcher, so maybe he will become a bigger contributor to our team. Josh Staumont, power pitcher, a little more velocity than most of the people on our team. Domingo Tapia, probably going to end up in AAA by the time we figure everything out as to what the roster is going to look like. And then our closer will be Scott Barlow. The big advantage that Barlow has against a lot of the other bullpen arms is that he does have 3 really nice pitches, but clearly not the stamina to be a starter. So as I think about the pitching staff, we've got a lot of nice average major league arms, but we don't have anyone who really looks exceptional. And even with the youth that we have in the rotation, it's hard to see anyone who's going to be developing into a all-star level pitcher. Although fortunately we will have an all-star every season. Most likely will be Perez, I'm guessing, when we get to July of 2022. So looking at the roster overall, it's not that great. As I mentioned, I thought catchers were a strength, and the scouting of OOTP generally agrees with us. Third baseman with Bobby Witt Jr. hopefully will become a strength. Shortstop, have a great defensive shortstop potentially in Nicky Lopez, which is good. And then we also obviously mentioned Mondesi, so we've got some flexibility there. But you look at most of the rest of the roster, our pitching in particular, 29th in starters, 24th in relievers, 27th in closers, outfielders, pretty mediocre, and then even some of the infield positions, kind of middle of the pack to below average. So it is definitely not a great roster. I think it would be a huge challenge for us to do what ownership wants and play close to 500 ball this season, especially if we do end up trading away Carlos Santana and or at some point Zach Greinke. They are the biggest contracts on our team with the exception of Perez, but those two are definitely not players that we want to build around. So I think job number one for us is going to be figuring out what we can get for Santana, how much of his contract we can get off the books, and then hopefully investing some of that money into more scouting and more player development to start really building up the minor league system that we are going to need as a small market team to be propelling our franchise forward over the next decade. Before we move on from the episode, just going to kind of review the game settings, let everyone know the way we are going to be playing this. Looking at the global settings, I like the traditional 20 to 80 scale, and I also kind of like the stars. Puts a little bit of a fog of war in terms of the overall ratings, which I think on the margins makes things a little more challenging. I am going to enable that GM-only users like myself are always in control of the lineup and hiring. Those who have watched previous series with me know that I really have nothing to do with running the team on a daily basis, and I think that 99% of the time that is going to be the case. But particularly with a small market team with a low payroll, if I'm in a situation and we're fighting for a wild card spot and I see the manager doing something stupid in terms of management of the starting rotation or playing decisions on a player who is injured or not, I do want to have the opportunity to step in on a rare occasion and help with that. So I am going to click that off to give myself that discretion, although I am really a GM focused player who's much more interested in building the team in the off season and through free agency and trading and player development than micromanaging each game on a daily basis. So certainly don't intend to go down that route. And then as far as the autosave and log settings, I'm just going to kind of simplify things here to be focused more on just my organization rather than the whole league. I'm not going to be looking at a lot of that information from anything except possibly the Royals and their affiliates from time to time. So just don't need to have a lot of that information saved because I am unlikely to do much, if anything, with that information. Moving on to the players in the Face Gen tab, only change I'm going to make here is I do like to see player personality ratings on the profile page, know how the team interacts, who has a good work ethic, who's a leader, who gets along well with others, who is potentially a toxic presence in the clubhouse. I think that's all stuff that in real life people would figure out pretty easily, so I do like to have that available, and it is certainly something that I use in decision making on the margins. Keeping injury frequency at the normal levels, the default levels. No other changes there. And then as far as face gen, don't really care about phony faces. Would rather have the game be running quicker. On the AI settings, not a ton to adjust here in challenge mode. Obviously, a lot of the options are kind of grayed out, but I'm going to bump training difficulty up a notch to 7 out of 10. It may end up being a little too easy, but given that I don't really know how OOTP 23 is going to play with the new game engine, I just don't want to cripple myself from the start managing the Royals. So if it turns out that I feel the trade difficulty is too easy, we'll certainly notch that back up. But right now, I'm just going to go with a 7 out of 10 on that. Almanac, nothing to see here. Online League, nothing to see here. Database, nothing to see here. League settings. There will be some stuff to think about in the league settings, however. Getting to the rules. I am going to change the minimum batters faced back to 1. Someone who grew up in the 80s watching baseball and the 90s, the loogie has a special place in my heart, and these games are going to be simulated in a matter of milliseconds, so I don't mind the extra pitching changes that may entail. I'm going to switch modified extra innings to spring only. Bit of a traditionalist, allow ties in the spring, that's fine. I am not going to do the expanded rosters until May of this year. Get why they are doing that in real baseball because of the short spring training, but I don't know that it's really going to be necessary for virtual baseball on the computer. Other than that, batter injured list is defaulting to 15 days. Did they change that with the new CBA? I knew it had been 10 last year. I'll get to check on that. Yeah, I'm going to change that back. It looks to me like the 10-day IL is still what applies to batters, and there's actually a 10-day IL for pitchers through the beginning of May, but we'll keep that at 15. Option years, we'll keep the rules to avoid people just shuttling people back and forth between the majors and AAA constantly. I'm going to still have the Rule 5 draft, nothing else that I want to change there. Want trading of injured players. Not going to allow draft pick trading until the major leagues actually allow it. I think that, as much as I try to play things straight and honest, when you start getting into draft pick trading, it's just too easy to exploit the AI and just build up a unrealistic farm system. So I want to try to avoid that as much as possible. They've got the new 20-round draft in there. 30 rounds of players should be interesting. Still have the typical international scouting, and then obviously we have the new draft lottery, which odds are the Royals will be participating in at the end of this season. So if we have one of the 3 worst records in the game, that would give us the best chance to potentially have the number 1 overall pick next year. Moving on to the financials, I'm not going to tweak anything here, I don't think. Just don't know enough about how the new game engine's going to work, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Looking at other options, I am going to disable automatic evolution of the league right now, just because we know that there's nothing interesting happening in terms of expansion. We've already added in the DH to the National League. We made a bunch of changes in the new CBA. May reactivate that in a season or 2, but right now just want to play the first couple seasons with the 30 teams that we have today, since obviously if there was going to be some expansion coming in the next couple of seasons, we would likely already know about that. Besides that, probably just going to change the names of the awards to match what they are in real life. And it looks like changing to Silver Slugger and Gold Glove is really the only other changes that I want to make to the options. I'm not going to change the player database at all right now. Historical, not going to be relevant. Stats and AI, again, not going to really tweak any of it. Oh, maybe we'll tweak a couple things here. Don't love the opener, but we rarely have it, so that's fine if somebody wants to use that from time to time. Not going to ban infield ships. We'll keep framing impact average. May put shifts down to just often from very often. Just tweak that a tiny bit to make it a bit more old school, but still respect that that's a part of the game today that it wasn't as much in the past. Yeah, not going to change any of the broad modifiers. So that is it for the settings. So with that, I'm going to call it an episode. When I come back in our next episode, going to spend a little bit of time perhaps trying to execute on the execution of Carlos Santana and potentially trading him away. And then I think in the next episode, also going to dig into our personnel and see what I need to do to make sure that we have the best coaching staff possible to develop our major league and minor league talent. So I could see, particularly if we are able to free up some salary and free up some cash by trading away a salary or two, could see us be somewhat active in terms of rebuilding our coaching staff with personnel that are more effective than who we currently have. Until then, thank you so much for watching and hope you have a great day, and looking forward to see what kind of damage I can do with the Royals over the next few years.